This is a really weird thing to say, so I apologize right off the bat, but this player is a guilty pleasure of mine to talk about. And the reason for that is because when he was drafted back in the 2017 NHL Entry Draft, I was honestly pretty intrigued by the entire profile he had, and I kind of wanted my Vancouver Canucks to take him back then, and they didn't. They went with Elias Pettersson instead, which in hindsight is one of the best picks of that entire draft, if not the second or first best pick. Okay, yeah, it's second because Cale Makar is really freaking good. But we're talking today about a player that not only I wanted to see get drafted by Vancouver, but a player that a lot of other people in Vancouver were also saying similar things back when EP40 was drafted. Hey, why didn't we draft this other guy? What the heck? This other guy was also available on the board. Why didn't we take him? Let's talk today about then Portland Winterhawks center Cody Glass, because his entire profile and his story has been so up and down to the point that now I'm starting to question where exactly we can go with his future. Now, normally these kinds of videos would be in the X years later format. Oh, it's 1 year after Owen Power was drafted, so let's talk about him 1 year later. Or we talk about guys from a few years ago. Oh, it's been, 3 years since X player from the 2019 draft was drafted. Let's talk about him then. 2017 was so long ago that it doesn't feel too appropriate to do a 5 years later kind of segment, especially since all the guys taken around Cody Glass, for the most part, are NHL talents, and they're all pretty good. So, this is a difficult video to talk about. And the reason for that is because Cody Glass, as we noted, has not had the same level of success as all the other players taken around him. He was taken 6th overall by the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2017 NHL Entry Draft. It kind of rolls off the tongue, that 2020 nowadays. It's been 2 years of this crap. But in 2017, you could see 5th overall, Vancouver, Elias Pettersson. Vegas took Cody Glass 6th overall. Lias Andersson went 7th to the New York Rangers. Mittelstadt, Rasmussen, Tippett, Velarde, a few other guys that were very good taken after Cody Glass, which makes a lot of Vegas fans still think, okay, we drafted Nick Suzuki and he was a really good prospect for us. It's just, we traded him because we didn't want to trade Glass in the first place. And now, if you review it, we've talked about this before, but all 3 of the initial Vegas Golden Knights picks in 2017 are all gone. Brannstrom, Suzuki, and Glass. But for Cody, his entire development profile has not really gone the way that you would have wanted it to, especially after watching this guy in 2017 play for the Portland Winterhawks. Back then, he was a 94-point player in 69 games, very nice amount of games, and he was projecting as a potential top-line two-way center that had some goal scoring and playmaking to his game, just an all-round player that was able to do everything on the ice. But as the years went on, you weren't really able to see Cody Glass translate those skills to higher levels of play in the ways that a lot of scouts projected he would be able to back then. He spent another season in Portland, 2 seasons actually, and eventually working his way over to the Chicago Wolves. His 2018-19 was seen as the transitory year. Okay, he was just under a point per game in the playoffs. He's gonna go out there, do his thing. He was great at the World Juniors, and then 2019-20 came around, and he was sort of rushed into the National Hockey League. He had 12 points in 39 Vegas Golden Knights games played, but a lot of people from back then would note that even though he was there, he wasn't necessarily growing in the ways you would have wanted him to. The next season, in 2020-2021, so the pandemic-shortened year, he had himself 10 points at both the NHL and the AHL levels. The NHL, though, being in 27 games, the AHL in 14 games. He then got traded over to the Nashville Predators in what was the infamous 3-team swap that really didn't help anybody. Like, Ryan Ellis was not really there for Philadelphia. Cody Glass was sent down to the AHL at the beginning of the season, so good on him for actually getting a full year's worth of play there. And then you have Nolan Patrick for Vegas, who isn't really doing anything either. This is the stat line for 2021-2022. Cody Glass in his first full season in the AHL was under a point per game. 62 points in 66 games, 14 goals, 48 assists, and he was under a point per game in the postseason as well. He also got called back up to the Predators for their main team heading into the playoffs against Colorado. He had 2 games played and 0 points because the Predators got smoked. But for Cody Glass, there is somewhat of a redefined development path that I'm really happy to be talking about in this video. Here's an article on ontheforecheck.com. This is the Nashville Predators version of SB Nation and their entire platform of media articles, etc. How Cody Glass is working his way back to the NHL. Written by Eric D. from May 11th, 2022. Milwaukee's leading scorer has no plans to be back in the American Hockey League next year. This article opens up by talking about how last summer the Predators engaged in a blockbuster 3-team trade. However, nearly a year later, the deal has gone mostly south for all of these teams. Cody Glass was always the most enticing part of this deal, which led many to being disappointed when he was sent down to the AHL just 2 games into the regular season. But, despite this being his 4th year in pro hockey, Glass had never played a full year in the AHL until this year, and when he came to Nashville last summer, there were glaring aspects of his game that just weren't NHL ready. The positive news is, though, no one could have questioned his defensive prowess, but his foot speed and lack of acceleration brought doubts about whether he could be a true difference maker in Nashville. In September, Mitch Brown of BP Ringside identified 3 critical skills foundational to Glass resurrecting his game: timing, tracing, and tracking. This article goes over and talks about how these skills have been incorporated into Glass's game over the course of the year. It does a really good job breaking it down with video clips and explaining how everything translates, so I highly recommend you go out there and check this article out, Cody Glass on theforecheck.com, and the piece here. But pretty much, when it comes to tracking, it's always been a good skill of his, and this article, while bringing up these skating setbacks, does conclude that when it comes to tracking the game, Cody Glass is indeed a very good one. But what about tracing and timing? There are a few video clips of examples of Cody Glass exhibiting some good tracing and timing. When he breaks into the neutral zone with the puck, he knows that his teammate is on the left and he notices there's an opposing defender, so he makes the right read and he responds accordingly. There are a whole bunch of examples of these kinds of shifts in this article. And so, when it comes to the verdict, it's these kinds of plays and a successful combination of timing, tracking, and tracing on and off the puck that allowed Glass to be Milwaukee's leading scorer this year with 62 points in 66 games. In hindsight, it's ridiculous to discount the need for a full season in the AHL, even for a top 10 pick. With some added strength, Glass should be ready for a full-time role in Nashville in 2022-2023. Which is why I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing to see him play the entire year in the American Hockey League. It's not really like the Predators were going out there and desperately needing his services anyway, because when you recognize that their center core was honestly pretty alright this season. I mean, Duchesne had a huge bounce-back year, Mikael Granlund was out there doing his thing, Ryan Johansson also doing his thing. These guys all just came out here and became what a lot of people expected they should have been able to become when they started out in Nashville. I mean, Mikael Granlund is a 60-point center again, so good on him for finally getting back up to speed after a whole bunch of down years in the Predators system. Ryan Johansson is also kind of self-explanatory. I mean, the guy had 70-point years in Columbus before heading over to Nashville, and it's good to see him bounce back into this kind of territory once again. So for Nashville, it's not really like they needed this guy, Cody Glass, to be an immediate option for them. So I'm really appreciative that they took the time to say, okay, there are still a few more kinks that you need to round out before we give you a spot. Go out there into the American Hockey League, learn what it takes to track a puck, time everything, and defend properly as well, and also work on your foot speed while you're at it too, and that's exactly what he's done. Sure, for a guy that was a 6th overall pick 5 years ago, you would have hoped for him to produce more than a point per game in the American Hockey League, but the past few years have really not seen too much significant development out of Cody Glass in the Vegas system, so better late than never, I guess, to see this guy actually get that development. Does he still have top-line potential? I'm not really too sure anymore, considering he is 23, so the time is ticking when it comes down to what this guy could become at his maximum output in the NHL. But at the very least, if you get a second-line center, a top 6 guy that could help you out in the power play and penalty kill, that would be a pretty good win when you consider the Ryan Ellis situation that was left off the Predators' hands. With him being injured and not being able to play to the same level that he was at before, it was definitely unfortunate to see him not suit up for Philadelphia, but at the end of the day, you got Cody Glass. So, talk to me in the comments, let your thoughts if you're a Nashville Predators fan about Cody Glass and the development. I'm expecting this video to probably be attractive to some other audiences because Cody Glass is not just a Nashville guy per se, he was a Vegas guy, and he was a Vancouver guy. A lot of Canucks fans here wanted this guy instead of Elias Pettersson, myself kind of included, so I will, what is the idiom that you can go out there and say, I will bite my tongue, I guess, because that was definitely not the correct decision to make with hindsight. So let me know your thoughts in the comments about Cody Glass and his development. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.